Hey there, I'm Sarah Holbrook. I'm the Executive Director of the Pinhead Institute here in Telluride, Colorado, and also the lucky interviewer of our Telluride Mayor, Sean Murphy.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. I'm feeling like a pirate today. What do you think about that?
Well,
Arg, arg.
you certainly look the part.
Yes.
And your shirt is quite swashbuckling, right?
Yes, exactly. Have you been buckling any squash lately? That doesn't really break down that way. Have you felt swashbuckling? Squashbuckling? Have you felt like a swashbuckler at all yourself lately, Sean?
No, and I'm just not flamboyant by nature, so
Yeah.
slow, steady, and even keel is pretty much the way I like to
well,
talk and dress.
Yes, well,
So-
you've got the party plaid going on.
Exactly.
That counts for something.
the
Speaking of
fall plaid.
parties, I understand that you had a big council meeting the other day.
We did,
Yes,
and
and
actually,
the budget was at the top of the list, huh?
which is not a real fun party item because it's the sobering part.
Yeah.
The idea of, okay, we needed to, we focused sort of in modules on different components of the budget. And so yesterday's discussion for what was planned for 2 hours didn't quite last that long.
Oh, that's good.
Was about the general fund.
Uh-huh.
And as you
And
know,
the
our general fund,
is funded by sales tax here in this town.
Absolutely, yep.
And that keeps the lights on and pays the salaries, and often you try to have a buffer of about 30% in reserve, right?
right. And so one of the realities we're struggling with is we hope we don't dip below this year's current level of sales tax, but we're really not expecting any more increase. So we're trying to basically freeze things and stay within of a conservative projection. So and then we always overestimate our expenses. So we were sort of looking at this balloon where we had much bigger expenses going into 2019 than we did in 18, and pretty much flat, if not maybe slightly diminished sales tax revenue.
So what are the big new budget items that make 2019 bigger than 2018?
It's really sort of things that we that are out of our control. I mean, our cost of salaries and things with merit increases, and with, we love to have people that do well, and we want to recognize and pay them, and we want to give them raises. And so things like, those 4% increases or those 5% merit, bonuses, that sort of thing, that all adds up. And so we're at a full staffing level now again. So we have about 75 full-time employees, and then when we go into our seasonal winter season, we have about 20 more seasonal ones. So
And that's for plowing the streets and things like that?
right, we do have an extra, more public works employees do come on during the winter season. So it was more of a delicate balance of thinking, okay, if we needed to cut things, where would we do it? We had some of the department heads, like the Parks and Rec department head, Stephanie Jacquet, who does a tremendous job with, not a ton of money. And we actually, in previous cycles, we've talked to her about, and maybe last month, maybe about capital program reduction, because she was planning on doing sort of an expansion of the hockey rink. To provide proper dressing rooms and things like that, which we don't have right now.
Yeah.
And so we said to her, ooh, if you wouldn't mind maybe putting that off for a year or so. So
will
we're
help
looking
how the budget
at
looks.
ways of trying to just be cautious, because we've expected a recession for a while, and it hasn't happened, and things seem to be at all-time highs in terms of real estate prices and stock market values. So, that doesn't last forever, and these things are cyclical. So I think we're trying to do this in a responsible and careful way, and the hope is, sales tax, when you look back over decades, even during the Great Recession, sales tax didn't dip that much. So the idea is, okay, even if we do have an economic setback nationally, it's probably not going to, be a disaster that's going to require us to fire someone, for example. But we want to be circumspect.
Yeah.
And so we will, this Friday we'll meet again, and we'll start talking about some of our specific enterprise funds, like our parking enterprise fund, and what's going on with that, and what's going on for next year with our affordable housing fund.
And those are not the sales tax funded funds, right?
Those are, they have their own dedicated revenue. The parking enterprise fund is funded from all the meter money.
Sure.
And
How about the parking tickets that everyone are always
those
rattling the chains about?
They go into the general fund. Those are fines and penalties.
I
And
know
so
about those.
those are about 2% of our overall revenue. So we're not really
Verging
reaping
on
a ton of
3.
money, even though the perception is out there that we've written more tickets this past year, let's say, for example. And I think that is actually true in absolute numbers, but it's not like it's goosing our budget, and we're not doing it to try to backfill a deficit of any nature. But those go into the general fund. So the parking fund is funded with the meter money only. The Affordable Housing Fund right now is funded with our 1/2 cent existing sales tax,
Sure.
plus the affordable housing mitigation fees on both new residential and new commercial construction. And so those are, again, separate and apart from sales tax.
Separate
Well,
apart from sales tax.
even
Yeah.
though a portion of the affordable housing thing is a dedicated portion of our sales tax.
Right, got it.
So, so we really, this is an annual exercise for us.
Yeah.
And when you make a budget, it's obviously your best guess, your best estimate, and real life often throws you curves, and sometimes you get actually more revenue than you expect. So, we've been concerned about real estate transfer tax, and we
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about this every time as well.
Yeah.
We had been kind of hovering around negative 14% off of budget for through July.
Right.
But I ran into a local person who works at one of the large multinational real estate agencies that's represented here, and she just told me that she was delivering a check to town for over $250,000 from a single closing transaction for the real estate transfer tax. So I think our finance director is going to be taking a little more comfort in that, and we
Right.
certainly all will be too, because that goes toward capital projects.
Right, exactly.
So,
Now, speaking of capital projects, is that like the town park stage?
yes,
Because I
exactly.
remember there was a big plan to do a lot of different things, and then it had to be scaled back.
Yep.
And now there's a second phase of the new town park. In the town park, there's this gorgeous stage. It's where everyone plays during bluegrass and blues and brews and jazz and all those wonderful things.
Yep.
And it was recently remade, and great towers for connecting speakers and things. But they didn't finish, I think, or they
There's a
didn't do
catering
what
and
they wanted
restroom
to
facility.
with catering and restroom, and now they're going to do that, right?
Yes,
As
we
they
had
started that?
budgeted, back in 2017, we budgeted $1.5 million for that project.
In this year?
In this year.
And now you're gonna
And
start
so
spending that and
we're gonna
making
start
that
doing
amazing.
that. And that
Yeah.
basically was already allocated, so it's not what's worrying us to keeping us up
Right,
at night.
right,
this
exactly. But I
year.
mean, it's something that should be celebrated, right? There's
Right.
going to be new bathrooms and a catering facility in that stage area that's going to be helpful to every single community partner who wants to do an event there.
Right, and that was a function of us being cautious and conservative. In the 2015 is when we completed the existing stage complex now, and it was always foreseen in the entire planning process that we would have this other component. We just decided to phase it and to
Right.
not do it all and not have to spend all that money at once.
Right,
So
so now
all
you're
in
spending
that
the rest of
project,
it.
I think the stage portion was approximately $2.5 million. This is an additional 1.5. So the whole complex was always foreseen to be about a $4 million project.
Sure.
And the longer we wait on these things, the higher the costs become
Yeah,
too.
right,
So it's
yeah.
a delicate balance of you don't want to wait too long,
Right.
or else you might need to redesign because your needs might have evolved, or you might have other user group interests at that point that say, hey, if you haven't started this, let's think
Yeah.
about adding such and such.
Right.
And we do, that $1.5 million also includes finishing off below the existing stage.
Oh, okay.
Because if you've ever been down there,
Yeah.
you'll know a lot of that is unfinished space.
Right.
And so
Kind of bunkery.
it would be much more useful for both the user groups for those festivals as well as for the community to have finished out space below there.
Yeah.
Even if it's just allowing for storage and things like that a little
Sure.
more efficiently.
Yeah.
So, but to your point, yes, this phase 2 is starting. And so you'll probably see, I was up on the Judd Weeby today and I was looking down into Town Park, and I think we've got sort of the area behind the stage is all fenced off with construction fencing. So we're starting.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So-
great. What else is going on that's exciting around town?
Well, let's see. Drawing on our meeting from the other day, the most recent meeting, the town finally, as promised, conveyed 3 parcels that the town owns in the county within the existing cemetery from the town to the cemetery district.
Okay,
Now,
let's not get into the weeds on that
those
one.
are
We
all
have talked
full
about
of
this
dead bodies,
before.
but
The
we're done with
cemetery
that.
is owned by a bunch of different entities. The town is ceding its little areas
Mm-hmm.
over to the county. The county can take care of it. Now, if anybody trips on a headstone or something and
Then
phones,
the county,
it's always the
the
county's.
cemetery district will have their
Yeah.
own insurance, and now the town is out of that. So we're happy about that.
Yes,
Um,
and let's talk about what a
next-
lovely little resource that cemetery is, right? I
It
mean,
really
it's beautiful,
is.
it's
I mean-
historic, it's well-kept.
Right.
There was, I think, a bond issue passed or a mill levy or something to kind of take good care of it, to provide funds to take good
2 years
care of
ago,
it.
you're right, they
Uh-huh.
did do a bond levy. I think that was the November of 2016 election cycle. and it was a mill levy. It was an additional property tax levy. I think what had happened historically was under the state statute they had the ability to go up to, let's say, 6 mil, and they used to be, I think, about 4 mil, and for whatever reason that 4 mil sunsetted back down to 2 or 2.5.
So they need
So
to
they
bump
were
it back up a
asking to
little
come
bit.
up a bit.
Yeah,
and
but
so
back to
that,
historic figures.
because they had run through basically their reserves.
Sure.
And so they were in a position where they thought, not only do we need a new fence, but we actually really need to start backfilling reserves and saving up for future issues. So the community obviously approved that one 2 years ago, and so you have, I think, a completely new cemetery board now too. Because Linda Tueller joined the board, Nancy Brown joined the board, and Janie Goldberg is on the board. Janie might have been sort of an overlap between the last board and this board, but those latter two former two are actually basically steering the cemetery in a more modern, contemporary way. So, of course, we're all presumably going to end up there one day, and so it's in everyone's best interest to make sure that it's well cared for and that it's at least funded appropriately.
Yes,
so they seem to be
absolutely.
there. But another thing that we did, speaking of land, was we did a little cleanup on land ownership surrounding the transfer warehouse.
Oh, okay.
So the
sure.
transfer warehouse, Telluride Arts obviously is the owner of that building at this point. They were going to the State Historical Society and asking for a grant for certain renovation work, and the State Historical Society said, okay, we'll give you the grant, but you have to give us a facade easement. You can never change your historic facade. Well, they went through the records and they figured out that unfortunately the transfer warehouse, both on the South Fur portion and on the West Pacific portion, encroaches on the town property, town right-of-way, by like 2 to 4 inches.
Oh, dear.
And so we
Shave the
went
stones
back and
off.
forth because the state said no grant unless
Yeah.
the town either gives you an irrevocable encroachment permit for that or gives you those couple inches. So
Yeah.
town council decided to give them the inches.
It
So
shouldn't be that hard.
No.
You're never going to want to not have that building there.
exactly. So
Yeah.
we have no problem doing that. So we took care of that at the most recent meeting as well. We also entered into a memorandum of understanding with the town of Norwood, with San Miguel County, and with the Telluride Foundation, and that those 4 parties committed to work together and in tandem to advance the broadband infrastructure effort
Yes.
that we're all, you might notice certain little streets in town and things are seeming to be trenched, and in front of the
Yes.
school here,
Yes, so
there's been
tell us
activity.
what's going on? Because I know we've talked for eons about the broadband. Anyone who's visited knows that sometimes your internet cuts out. It's not been a great service
Those are
area.
bits and pieces of creating a new backbone for fiber, and the stuff that's happened in front of the school is actually something that Region 10, which is sort of the southwest region, part of the southwest region of Colorado, that's multi-county organization. They had certain Department of Local Affairs grants that they were helping communities like ours seek and obtain. So what you're seeing in front of the school is effectively a DOLA-funded, Department of Local Affairs funded fiber project. And so the town, concurrent with that, said, you know what, we want to, go on record saying that we need to extend that backbone everywhere we can within town so that we can have user or provider neutral locations, and then somebody else can come into the marketplace instead of CenturyLink or instead of Spectrum and come to the town when we finally stitch this all together.
Right.
We put fiber under Mahoney when we repaved Mahoney last
okay,
year.
sure.
And so we just want to make sure that we start, smartly connecting and creating this entire skeleton below ground that will allow us one day to all be served a lot
And
better.
that's right here, but I mean, some of the difficulties is, kind of lines coming into the town of Telluride from elsewhere.
Right. We have a lingering issue that's still not resolved, where we have a segment that goes from Nucla down to the Sunshine, sort of over by that park off of 145. So from Nucla to Sunshine, there's approximately 100 miles, I guess, as the crow flies, and there are almost 100 landowners there. So San Miguel Power Association did a new transmission line through there about 5-6 years ago. They, as part of that transmission line, actually strung and or buried fiber throughout the entire corridor there. But they forgot to ask for permission from the landowners when they got the easement to put up the electrical and the fiber. They forgot to ask for any commercial purpose allowance. So some of those landowners, I think we're down to 3 now, have basically been holding out and saying, no, we don't want you to use that fiber, which it wouldn't make a bit of difference to them because it's not going to be, there's no more invasive activity that's going
Right,
to occur.
it's already there.
It's dark.
Can we turn it on?
And so can we turn it on? Can we light it up? So the Telluride Foundation's been working for over 2 years on that project, and they've made progress, but there's still more to be done. But we figured, notwithstanding the fact that we have these maybe log jams here and there, we are just going to go complete everything. So this DOLA grant, the Department of Local Affairs grant, actually starts at the place at Sunshine where that SMPA fiber ends. The DOLA grant is now bringing fiber up along 145, turning, coming in down the spur, and will come to the essential places of the school, the library, town hall. So as soon as we get that
So
lit
we're
up,
assuming that that switch is going to go on at some point.
I would say,
Could be tomorrow?
Another couple years. And we may finally have all the jigsaw pieces in place then.
Okay.
But our goal right now is, and we as town council gave direction to Public Works about 6 weeks ago, yes, everywhere, anytime you open a road or open an alley, or a homeowner needs to, is doing a construction project and needs to trench through a certain area, please put conduit in there so that we can, and map it. So we have a master plan that shows, here's where we already have connectivity.
Yeah.
And so I believe that's what they're doing down on South Davis Street right now, because they marked with, they sawed into the concrete, and now they've trenched from Main Street down to effectively where I live, the bridge over to Element 52. They've come that entire way. So it's, there's progress being made. It'll be dark for a while, but hopefully not forever.
Yeah.
So we entered into basically a memorandum of understanding with those other parties saying, yes, we're on board with helping you get whatever permits you need to do these things inside the town, and we, the town, are also going to spend our own money to create the skeleton ourselves so that we can control it and make sure that one competitor or one anti-competitive provider doesn't keep us all hostage, for the next 50 years.
Right. That's a
So
good thing. Yeah.
that happened. Other things of note, actually, I had the opportunity, there was a meeting of Regional Housing Authority directors over in Mount Princeton a week ago.
Okay.
So I was invited to speak over a 2-day period. The first day I talked about the town of Telluride's affordable housing progress that we've made since the 80s, and talked about the 2 ballot measures that our town council recently recommended for our voters' consideration, that being an additional half-cent sales tax.
Additional half-cent
that would
sales
be devoted
tax
entirely
to affordable housing, to a fund.
And 2 mil
2 mil
potential property
potential
tax.
property tax.
So, and there's.
And that would also go to the fund.
That would only go
And
only for
how
affordable
much would that
housing.
increase? Like, say you have a house that's worth $100,000. How much would 2 mil add to your tax bill?
2 mil on $1 million house is like another $147, so $14.70
Got
or
it.
whatever.
Okay,
So
yeah.
a year additional. So
Yeah.
the increment is not large, but
Right, but the pool could
collective
be-
pool could be
yeah,
great.
got it.
And we estimate that if that measure were to pass, 2 mils in the aggregate for the entire town of Telluride would generate a little more than $500,000 a year. 554,000 was the estimate.
Right, so you presented to this group of
So we presented to this
regional
group
housing
about,
authorities.
here's what we're doing in Telluride. Here's, we basically, our baseline, which we've talked about before, is in today's dollars, we have a half-a-cent sales tax that's already devoted to affordable housing. That brings in about $750,000, and we've made some adjustments this calendar year to our affordable housing mitigation fees, which have taken a revenue stream that traditionally is around $200,000 and has moved it closer to $500,000 a year.
Right.
That's kind of where we're on track for at this point. So our idea was, well, guess what? That latter funding source is very variable, because if people don't build new residential or
no
they
new
don't
money
build
is
new
coming in
commercial,
from
there's
that,
no
yeah.
new fees on that. But if we have something like an evergreen funding source like a sales tax, where it's going to happen, people are going to consume goods and services that are taxable, and then a portion thereof can go to that purpose, or property tax everyone has to pay every year. So we figured, let's build in maybe more solid funding sources that are not going to swing wildly in any given year.
Sure.
So the nice news for Telluride was, we start off the day with every year about $1 million to spend on affordable housing, and many of these communities don't. They don't have these tax mechanisms in place, and they can no longer elect to adopt a real estate transfer tax either, because that's not been allowed since, I think, Tabor from the 90s. So that was actually the subject of my second talk. But my first talk was basically taking people forward from the 1980s when the Telluride region decided, yes, we do need to have a commitment to affordable housing, through here's what we did in Shandoka during the 90s, and then phase 4 of Shandoka in 2003. Here are the projects that came out before the recession, and here are the 3 that are happening. You know, Virginia Placer having just been completed, but here's the Big Dig project, and there'll be 10 units there, and the town will throw about $1.25 million in as a subsidy for those 10 affordable housing units.
And Lot B.
And then Lot B is actually about to start coming out of the ground.
I saw the diversion of traffic there.
That'll be about $1.3 million, I think, would be the subsidy for those 16 units. So the point was just basically to help educate people. Look, here's what we do.
Yeah.
We collect a certain amount of revenue, and then we've been able to make these kind of subsidies where we can offset a significant part of the cost of a project.
Yeah.
And then the Virginia Placer model, which is a rental model, and there we did revenue bonds. So we basically figured out, okay, if we have each of these units rented out at these assumed rates, which are all very reasonable, how much can we ask the vote, how much could we raise in the private financial markets for a bond? The answer to that was about $8.1 million. Well, the project cost was about $9.1 million. So that led us to say, okay, then we need to throw a $1 million subsidy at that. But at least going forward, then the town presumably won't have to, pony up any more funds, because
Right.
the rents will cover everything.
Will
So
cover
these
the-
communities, a lot of them are struggling with, okay, how do you do that kind of leverage thing? And so it was neat to see people's light bulbs going off in certain heads. And then it was also interesting to be on a panel. I was on a panel with the gentleman from Aspen who runs their regional housing authority. And goodness, I mean, a portion of their real estate transfer tax is allocated to housing. They get between 5 and 15 million for affordable housing just off of that revenue of their real estate transfer tax that's devoted to housing.
Wow.
So he's got obviously a much larger budget
Yeah.
and a lot larger revenue pool. The takeaway with him, though, was a lot of the Aspen deed restrictions, kind of like ours. The deed restrictions from the 80s here were maybe not as well thought through and a little looser and aren't as easily enforced to require that unit actually is occupied by an employee, for example, and whatnot. So they've gone through, they used to have a set of deed restrictions where after 30 years they went away.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
then if you happen to be the lucky person living in the property,
Yeah,
you just
you
suddenly
got to
got a
keep
free
it,
market
yeah.
property. So that's a little bit of unjust enrichment, it
Yeah.
seems. So he was kind of going through their unique challenges and problems. They're obviously developing more out of town. Apparently they've just completed a really cool sounding, I think it was a 30-unit project in Basalt that's
Right.
affordable housing deed restriction. So it's nice to compare what we're doing against others, and it's also, my takeaway was, wow, Telluride is so much further ahead than most of the rest of the state.
Wow.
So we shouldn't always be so self-critical.
Okay.
But we should all vote for, I think we should vote for those ballot measures.
Right,
I'm planning
right.
to vote for both of those ballot measures, but I know I'm hearing a lot from the community about, oh my God, there are 18 ballot measures or something? I don't know the full number, but there are a number of property tax measures that are on there, and so
Sure, to raise money for different entities, different
for
things.
mental health and for the fire district.
Oh,
and
right.
The Med Center wants to,
Yeah.
have the right to go up a bit. So all these are worthy things, and we
Yeah.
have to figure out what the right trade-off is and what we can afford
Yeah.
individually. But there'll be more information than you ever wanted to know in the so-called Blue Book, which will come out in the couple weeks before the ballots are mailed. So the Blue
Okay.
Book should come out at the end of September.
And is that something that's in all of our post office boxes?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And that's something generated by the state, and
That will explain everything
explain
on
all
the
these
ballot.
various different
Okay,
ballot measures.
Great.
So,
And is there any update on the hospital situation? I know that or the Med Center, we're thinking of maybe trying to find land in
I
Lawson.
think
Is
everybody's fingers are crossed
Uh-huh.
that it sounds like there is a deal that's very close to being completed.
But no headlines right now.
No headlines right now.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, the issue that the town can be helpful on is the water and sewer.
Oh, right.
And we have considered this kind of in an executive session, and I think the takeaway is the town is very happy to cooperate, and we're trying not to impose any unruly or unnecessary conditions, and we want to keep this, as minimal in terms of what we're demanding, so that we get something in the right place.
So what you're saying is the town's contribution to making this work would be if they said something about the water treatment plant, because the thinking is that the Med Center might go in the area adjacent to the water treatment
In
center.
close proximity, yeah.
In close proximity at Society Turn
Right.
near Lawson. And you said some numbers last time we talked that were kind of interesting of the use of the Med Center. How many from Mountain Village? How many from Lawson? How many from Down Valley? How many from
So
Telluride?
the
There's
latest
percentages
user group
were-
percentages
Yeah, that was an interesting
that I'm
thing.
aware of,
Lay it on us.
35% of the user group for the medical center today is from within the town of Telluride.
Sure, that makes sense.
25% of the user group comes from Mountain Village.
Okay.
That includes all of your ski accident visitors and the locals there. And 40% of the remaining 40% of the user group comes from Down Valley.
Wow, okay.
So the location at Society Turn is actually a natural.
Yeah, it's
so
pretty
that all
good.
three components of user groups can be served in kind of a central location, central to all of them.
Right. And there's enough physical space on the land that they're thinking of to be able to sustain a nice medical center that
There
has room
is.
to grow,
The-
because I think that's the problem with our current location.
Exactly. I think they've really, the ask has been, and I'll get the numbers mixed up because I don't know exactly the number of acres they think they need, but they're planning on something that would allow up to 40,000 square feet to one day all be built and functional as a medical center. I don't know if they'll start with a building quite that large. I think they'll start with something maybe 25,000 square feet
And how many
range.
square feet is the current?
Ooh,
Not that big.
Not that big.
Let's just say
I
not
would
that
say
big.
it's closer to 15,000 square feet.
sure, so immediately it would have
it would
much more
immediately
space.
be right-sized for the current demand, and it would have room to grow.
Yeah, future
And so
expansion.
that's why that location, although super convenient for some of us, is really not ideal for their mission.
Right.
And so I think we're on the cusp of hopefully having maybe by the end of the year. I'm not part of the medical center board or anything, so I'm not on the front line of that negotiation. But what I've heard and the people I've talked to have sort of indicated we're closer than we ever have been. And so I think that's the bright spot and the real good takeaway that we're almost there.
Yeah.
And they have the unique ability, I mean, obviously they're their own taxing district and they can raise a bond that way too, but I was told that they qualify for these really interesting Department of Agriculture rural program loans. And so that applies to medical centers in rural areas as well.
Wow.
So my understanding is that they have at least one of the choices for their funding to build the building comes from a very low interest federal loan. So that could work out well for them as
Yeah.
well. But we obviously, I know there's been some history with the town over location of the medical center and or what the town could and should do to support that effort. And I think we're finally coming to a point where now that we've had some of that stalemate and some of that finger pointing, we're beyond that. And now the idea
We've forgotten
is
all about it. We've moved on.
we're ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with them and be a good partner and a good faith supporter of this effort.
Excellent.
So,
What else are you excited about?
well, let's see. The
We'll look at your
Colorado
little cheat sheet there.
Colorado Mayor's Summit occurred on the 14th and 15th of September since last we spoke. And one of the really alarming topics actually was this thing called Constitutional Amendment number 74, I think is what it is. This is something where on the face of it, it seems completely reasonable and innocuous, but actually could have an enormous negative impact on every municipality, every county, and the state. So what's at issue here is the takings clause of the Colorado Constitution. So since 1876, the Colorado Constitution has provided, and we, Telluride, have had a unique history and a personal real-life experience with this, for a governmental taking needs to be reimbursed, or the taxpayer needs to be made whole for that. Well, they've proposed amending the language of this provision to say any reduction in fair market value caused by a government action requires compensation. So we could find ourselves very easily, let me give you a real life example. Let's say the town buys a parcel, a piece of real estate that's next to some private condominiums, or maybe a building lot that's nearby there there's foreseen to be some sort of upscale development. Well, if the town just bought something and everyone knows, that's going to be like high density affordable housing, those adjacent landowners are going to have a fit. And they're going to point, if this passes, which I hope it doesn't, they'll point to this and say, well, we're going to sue the town because you've just diminished the fair market value of my land or my existing condo. So we could find ourselves in a situation, and it's not limited to just the town purchasing housing. Let's say the town builds affordable housing at a location where the town already owns, all the adjacent landowners could say, oh no, you've just diminished the value of our property.
Right.
Or the town changes some zoning somewhere and decides, I think that maybe more density is a good idea, not necessarily for an affordable housing project, but let's say additional density is desirable in a certain location. Well, the existing less dense owners all around there are going to say, whoa, wait a minute,
gonna
you've just
diminish the
diminished our
value of
fair
my
market
property."
value.
Yeah.
So you can think of a number of things. Or if you grant a liquor license, uh-oh, now I have a bar that's,
Yeah.
on my 500 feet from my home. You've just diminished my fair market value.
That
So
sounds exhausting.
we could find every municipality, not just Telluride, is at risk. This is actually a very disturbing possible trend. What's happening here, the real genesis of this is the oil and gas industry is very mad at Boulder.
Okay.
Because Boulder has implemented all these local, and county regulations for Boulder County that prohibit certain activity. And so these guys are like, hey, you are reducing the fair market value of my energy drilling right, and I'm going to come after you, Boulder,
Wow.
for compensation. So they've couched this as, oh, this is just a simple, innocent thing to protect private property rights, when really it's a revenge effort
Right.
against communities like Boulder who have said certain activities are not okay,
yeah.
and we're not going to allow that. And they're suddenly then the person who has owns the land or the claim, the mineral interest,
Wow.
suddenly is saying, whoa, you've impaired my fair market value. So that's what's going on here. It's not some sort of innocuous language. And frankly, Telluride is a poster child for this. With
Yeah.
our condemnation action against San Miguel Valley Corporation,
Right.
that was a taking, and we paid them reasonable compensation. In fact, some would argue extremely unreasonably high compensation, but they got for sure reasonable. So the system and the language as it was set up back from 1876 worked
It's worked
just fine.
We don't need 74.
We do not need Amendment 74. So a bunch of mayors, including me, got very upset about this, and we're going to
So
be
there's a public education campaign. We're
on a
launching
mission.
it right
yeah.
here on Telluride
PSA, a
TV.
public service
Yes,
announcement.
Exactly.
So, okay, the takeaway should be make up your own mind, as always. But this will be discussed, the pro and cons of this will be discussed in the Blue Book that everyone will get at the end of September.
Yes.
And this is something where I think the cons far outweigh the pros.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
that's
Anything else?
kind of it.
What
Other
have I
than
not asked
Original
you about?
Thinkers is
Oh,
coming.
yes, I know. We're very excited. Original Thinkers, October 4th through 7th here in Telluride and over in the Mountain Village.
What about Pinhead? What's going on with
Oh, yeah, October 15th, thank you for asking, is our Pin-Turn presentation night. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a day and a night because we have so many kids that went off on internships this summer that we're doing the out-of-town kids in the afternoon from 3 to 5.
Okay.
Then reception from 5:30 to 6:30. Then 6:45 till around 8:30, the local kids are going to go on the stage of the historic Sheridan Opera House, free and open to the community. Please come. If
Excellent.
you have a high school junior who thinks they might want to apply, they have to come to the presentation, either the afternoon or the evening segment. They don't have to come to both.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you for asking. So it's an exciting
Terrific.
time, and it's fun to see. I've been actually traveling all around the region because Pinhead works in Montrose and Olathe and Ouray and Norwood and Nuclear Natarita and Paradox and Cortez and Dolores. So I was just in
This
Dolores
is like
yesterday.
the ideal regional model.
yeah,
You do
yeah.
a better job than those governments do.
Yeah. Oh well. I mean, we just
Of all cooperating with one
Yeah, we
another.
just kept growing little by little and only contiguously. So I'm not hopscotching over a community.
Yeah.
But tomorrow I'm going to go to Olathe and Montrose and see the kids who did internships there and have them present to the juniors in their high school and talk about what they did and see if those juniors would be interested in applying. And it's
these
just
are
fun to get into
presumably
these other regions.
Life-changing
I would say
internship
so.
experiences,
yes,
right?
Yes. It does seem like they've had a great time and learned so much and grown so much. It tends to be about a 6-week internship elsewhere during the course of the summer between their junior and senior year. So all the kids that are presenting now are now seniors, and they'll be applying to college, and it'll give them an idea of what they want to study. And that's
Are there like-kind organizations like Pinhead in other states
not a
and other
single one.
communities?
We are
No?
a unicorn. No, I mean there probably are science centers. There's
Just like your shirt, it's one of a kind,
Right,
or your
exactly.
blouse,
Yes,
sorry.
yes. We're
Yes.
the swashbuckling nonprofit providing STEM education. There are other great places that do wonderful work in science education for kids, and I know there's probably other places that also arrange internship for kids. But this is the only place that I know that works in 12 area schools and sends off 33 kids to do individual internships, as well as running, coding and tech classes and computer and robotics and things like that. So we have a lot going on.
Well, just like our affordable housing efforts, we can be proud of actually,
Yeah.
we're making more progress than most other communities.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah.
doing something that most
think you're right.
everyone else is not.
Yes, well,
Well,
they can
all
always
good.
call me and ask how to do it, and I'll give them my primer.
So do you have any questions from the community?
Yes,
or are there
yes,
any burning
was-
issues on
yeah,
your mind?
No, just the
Okay.
one is, when we drive in and out of the spur, you can see the porta potties again. And I know that we had talked about that off camera, another time. But do you know who's in charge of that? Can we change that for the next time? That was a question from the community.
I think that anyone who wants to try to influence what's going on there, it's Parks and Rec that really is the coordinator of all these and those. I
The
think
point
we're
being,
there
when you drive
for
into our
Blues and
gorgeous
Brews.
valley, you then see a bunch of porta potties on the side, waiting either to come into a festival or leave from a festival.
Yeah.
And it doesn't give a
I
lovely
agree.
little
It's
curb
pretty
appeal as you're
unseemly.
driving in. I'd
Yeah.
much rather see the elk, which, by the way, are pretty spectacular.
So I think the reason that you're seeing and that's developed this summer is Virginia Placer. Because we used to stage those things in addition to other heavy equipment and trucks along Black Bear Road between Shandoka and the Public Works facility. Well,
Can't
now
do
that
it
we
now.
have a
There's
great,
housing.
wonderful housing thing with a beautifully new repaved road, or paved road finally, that's not just crushed gravel, those had to go somewhere. But I agree, they're not well suited for that location.
Yeah.
That location is absolutely not well suited for those things. So I too noticed the same thing when I was heading out of town a few days before Blues and Brews, and I'll ask Stephanie Jacquet, the Parks and Rec director, and/or the Public Works director, Paul Rude,
Sure.
and figure out
Maybe we'll
are
have
there
an answer
alternative
next time.
spots. So
Yeah, we'll revisit that.
I will do that.
Yeah, but that's basically it. It's a beautiful fall day. Everybody should get out and hike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I said, I did the Jed Weeby this morning, and I was kicking myself, thinking, "My God, the weather is absolutely ideal. It's breezy and it's sunny, and I need to do this for as long as this weather lasts." Now,
Yes.
not that we don't want snow already.
Yes.
But while we have these great fall days, these
get
are
out there, shall
perfect
we?
opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great to talk to you, Sarah.
Yes,
Thanks
always
as
a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sean.
All right.
Have
Thank
a good
you.
one.